All right, thank you. And I'm going to share my screen here. I have a PowerPoint to accompany the program today. So let's do that. There's some high-tech stuff here. All right, here we go. So today's program is titled Empathy and Understanding During a Pandemic, and which is kind of a general title, but we'll get more specific as we get into it here. So just a little bit about me for those who don't know me. I'm located in Galena, Illinois. I'm from Galena and was gone intermittently about a decade or so for school and other things. But as of now, I'm a certified orientation and mobility specialist, and that's through ACVREP, which stands for the Academy for Certification of Vision Rehabilitation and Education Professionals, bit of a mouthful, and also a certified vision rehabilitation therapist through ACVREP as well. I have a lot of experience working with the VA in Chicago and out in Palo Alto, California. And a lot of my work out there was with technology, accessible technology for low vision veterans, and doing some other rehab services as well with the blind centers. And so what I'm trying to do and set up for myself and for our community here in the Galena area is providing similar services to the tri-state area for people of all ages in blind rehabilitation, and also technology services for seniors. So I've done some group classes, one-on-one classes, those types of things, just basic technology access. So the company I started, which is a one-person company at this time, is called Innovative Independence Incorporated. So the goals of today's program, like I said, I did want it to be kind of more like a discussion. So feel free to put something in the chat window. Like Larissa said, we'll watch for that. And that way we don't have voices talking over each other during, but I can address them as they come up. But basically, we'll start by introducing kind of some of the points of the last couple months, a generalized response people have had to the COVID-19 shutdown, and some of the recommendations at the state level that we've had to follow, including the quarantine. We'll define and discuss the word empathy and why it's important. And then my main inspiration for the program, it has to do with my experience working with vulnerable populations, both people with physical difficulties and intellectual differences, and how people are affected differently by these recommendations. And then we'll talk about how to encourage methods to increase our patience and empathy. And finally, I'd like to have any kind of discussion or questions welcomed throughout the presentation, like I said, or we can save it to the end and see what y'all have to say. So here we go. So obviously, this has been kind of a crazy time since the shutdown. Anxiety and stress for people of all ages and walks of life have been high. So some of the main things that people have been very concerned about, obviously just fear of contracting the virus, the concern about giving the virus to others, especially considering for a long time, we were really worried that, asymptomatic people could pass it along without knowing, or you could pick it up very easily off surfaces, that kind of thing. The financial instability of people losing employment or losing business. And of course, businesses just being closed altogether. And now the general public, the rules about entering different businesses, how it's inconsistent state to state. And finally, bigger picture, we've got political implications, and then sort of the extreme attitudes on different ends from people So these are all some of the things that have been causing a lot of just generalized stress amongst people in the area. So now things are starting to open up. So that's very exciting. But of course, there's still concerns. People are hesitant, worried about next steps. And tensions run high as some disagree on what's okay and what's not, especially where we're at in the tri-state area. You know, it's different in Wisconsin and in Iowa. So especially here, people are sort of confused and conflicted about who to believe, what, you know, what's okay, where is it okay to go? And then we've got Chicago too. Of course, that overlap is a concern to a lot of people as well. So it's still stressful, even though things are kind of looking up. It's difficult for people to feel out of control and just the general direction of the world and their business and what's going to happen. And of course, we use social media as a place to share both what we would believe to be factual information and also subjective information, like our opinions or our thoughts, in a very public way. So more important than ever, it's an important time to practice empathy and understanding amongst all of these, you know, confusing, stressful, anxious times. So how do we do that? So first, we'll talk about what empathy is. I think everybody kind of knows, but just as a reminder to really kind of put it back in our brains and think about what it means in this specific scenario. So generally speaking, empathy means being able to understand and share the feelings of others. And that's like the expression, we walk a mile in someone's shoes. So you're totally understanding, trying at least to understand and feel the same way that someone else is feeling. Of course, it's difficult to feel without all the details of a situation. And then it's not necessarily a universal response to the suffering of others. So people vary at their levels of empathy. Some people takes a lot of work and a lot of information to be able to be empathetic. Other people are very sensitive and feel it very naturally. And of course, there's people that are sort of narcissists and feel nothing at all. So definitely a wide spectrum there. We have some different types of empathy. Affective empathy is an emotional response. So it's an emotional understanding that may lead to someone feeling concern for another person's well-being. And it may even lead to a person feeling their own emotional distress based on somebody else's difficulty. We have somatic empathy, and that's more of a physical response. So that's like a good example is blushing when someone else is embarrassed, or feeling like your heart's racing because someone else is experiencing something distressing. And then we've got cognitive empathy, and that involves being able to understand a person's mental state and what they might be thinking in response to the situation. And that's like a rational thinking of a situation as opposed to feeling anything impulsively. So I think primarily today, maybe I'm referring to mostly the cognitive type of empathy, because we're talking about how to sort of read a situation and think about it and consider the possibilities before responding or before reacting, especially in your mind or in a public way as well. So just some different types of ways they define empathy. So why is it important? Could be a really long list, obviously, but just speaking why is it important for empathy? Why is it important for you to experience empathy, not only for the other person, but it helps with our own emotional regulation, and it can promote our helping behaviors. So the more, like holding a door for someone or doing something for someone that you would hope that they would do for you. Obviously, what goes around comes around, that kind of thing. So it's good to have that sort of an empathetic impulse, because, it's going to come back around to you when you need something. And finally, it can ease your own stressful feelings like anger and resentment or jealousy or any of those sort of hot feelings that come often as a result of not having all the information in a situation, and us jumping to conclusions based on our own experiences. So having empathy gives you the opportunity to reflect and consider some of the details that maybe is made up, but maybe even making those details up can help you to feel less stressed out in that moment of being, angry at someone for something in the public for some reason. So what are some barriers to feeling those good feelings? It'd be nice if we all could just be always assuming the best in each other. But some barriers to empathy, there's a bunch of them, but some of the main ones I considered relevant again to today and the scenario we're in is something they call victim blaming. This is assuming someone's circumstances are their choice or their fault and could have been prevented had they done something different. So kind of like a classic, typical example of victim blaming. Sometimes people refer to like assault and they might say like, oh, well, if they hadn't been wearing that certain thing or doing that certain thing at that certain time, then that never would have happened to them, when obviously that's not their fault at all. So that's one big barrier that a lot of times that people tend to fall back on. So also we have our personal difficulties. If you're experiencing your own difficulties, it's going to be harder to empathize when you're distracted by your own stressors. And then finally, we have making snap decisions or making a reaction based on assumption instead of having all the information before deciding how you feel about something. So the main thing is to remember that everybody is different, and it really comes into play when you remember that, because I know, personally, I have a lot of expectations for people, for myself, for how I want to be treated in the public or whatever. And obviously with the pandemic and stuff, all the different rules that we've had, there's a whole new like collection of things that we're supposed to be doing or not supposed to be doing. And so it's important to remember all the differences that we have and how these new rules may affect people differently. And I just listed a bunch. Of course, there's tons more, but we've got age, gender, where we're from, how we're raised, what we value, our day-to-day life, financial situations, our family structure, political views, physical abilities, mental abilities, illness and injury, and of course, the list goes on and on. So going back to how I came up with just wanting to have this discussion today, it comes from my background of working with both an aging population and then those with varying physical and intellectual abilities. So it's easy for me to consider the difficulty with some of those types of populations that are beyond the obvious feelings that are shared by the majority of the population, just the inconvenience of it, the fear of the fear of the virus and sort of the day-to-day things that we experience. There's an additional I would imagine there's like an additional list of difficulties that people may have if they have different kinds of physical or intellectual disabilities. So my work experience has allowed me to experience this type of empathy and imagine these potential barriers that people could be experiencing that people may not consider have they not worked with that type of population before. And so what we'll do next is go through some of the specific physical ailments that I have considered to be potential just things to consider and how they may relate to the social distancing rules that we've been following for the last couple of months. So first, obviously my background has a lot to do with working with people who are low vision and visually impaired. And so that comes along with a lot of considerations for how people might act in the public, and how they may adjust to these new rules that we've been following. So first of all, people who are visually impaired, I know there's a sort of a stereotype, maybe using a white cane or sunglasses or utilizing a dog as a guide, some different things that may scream, hey, I'm visually impaired. But a lot of people who are low vision aren't recognizable as low vision. So you could be diagnosed as having low vision and it could be a result of field loss, like maybe you can't see anything on one side. You could just have very low acuity where things would be very blurry, or it might be hard to recognize faces or read signs or see arrows on the floor. There's seeing double, or maybe just taking longer for your eyes to adjust from close to far away, and just some difficulty with that. So that was like the main thing I thought of. Obviously, I think about obstacles for people who are low vision a lot because I work with that population. I work with kids to like show them how to maneuver in a grocery store and maneuver around a community and cross streets safely, and how to ask for help when you need it. And my concern was a lot of these regulations with the virus were going to just maybe make it even that more difficult for people that are low vision to be independent and be able to accomplish the things they need to do, because people are too scared to get close to them, offer assistance, or people may react sort of, like at an impulse and not consider that maybe there's a reason why they were standing too close or something. So some potential obstacles specifically for people who may be low vision: they may not be able to determine that 6-foot recommendation. They might not have any idea they're standing so close to you. A guide dog especially is not going to know anything about a human pandemic. So they're not going to know not to guide someone closer to others. They may not be able to see the very confusing arrows at Walmart. I know I have a hard time and I can see them perfectly, but it's still difficult to get used to that. And I can't even imagine if you were trying to follow tape arrows and you're just trying to stay oriented in the store. So another thing that, we teach a lot for people that are younger or just newly visually impaired and learning to grocery shop, for example, for the first time independently. The first lesson is just how to get to customer service and then to ask for assistance. So, and they would be asking for a human guide so that they could help them shop and get everything that's on their list. And that's going to require, a distance that's far less than 6 feet, because they'd be holding on to the store employee's arm. And also there's a recommendation if you ever need help crossing a street, it's another way that you can get assistance if you get disoriented. So, and then finally, maybe people need to touch things more and, just to stay oriented or find where they're at in a location, in a store. So just something to consider with that. It may not be they're trying to touch everything to get their germs on it or something, but maybe that's just a necessary way to stay oriented. Next, I have hearing loss. This is another one I've thought about a lot, especially with the mask situation. So in individuals with any kind of hearing impairment, they may struggle with communicating now more than ever. The masks, if someone relies on lip reading, trying to get, communicate with a mask on with lip reading, it's just really, really not going to happen. And then it's very difficult to understand people through the mask, especially when you're outside or there's any sort of ambient noise going on around you. That's hard anyways, and I can only imagine if you had low hearing already, that's going to make it even harder. And finally, it may be a reason that somebody doesn't hear, direction, or asking someone to move out of the way, or asking them to follow a certain direction. It may be they might not be ignoring, they may just not be able to hear because of the mask, or because maybe they just can't hear you. So just something, definitely with the lip reading thing, I've considered that a lot, because I know I've had a hard time understanding and feeling understood while speaking with a mask on. And so I can only imagine if you actually had low hearing, how much harder it would be. Next, we have just a variety of physical difficulties. I guess I'm considering mostly balance issues. People may require the assistance of someone standing closer to them than 6 feet. And it may not be, they may need help from someone unexpectedly that isn't, whoever they were living with or whatever. So they also may need to touch things occasionally for balance, or require that physical assistance from another human. And finally, they may require public transit to get around. So just kind of similar with the touching things to orient, people just may need to use their hands still to just stay balanced and stay oriented and stay stable. And then we've got memory loss, of course. Again, just very generically speaking, but you could maybe forget the 6 foot thing, forget to pull your mask up, may not remember that you're in Iowa and it's different than when you're in Illinois versus Wisconsin, especially here. Like I said, it is confusing and people don't always remember. So just being patient for people to get a reminder, and it may not be, a malicious act to not have your mask fully over your nose or something. And then finally, there's, I'm sure, a whole other range of just age-related difficulties. For example, people feeling they need to be quarantined even longer, or people that live in assisted living or like a nursing home setting right now, especially. I know they're still not having visitors, I don't believe. So being quarantined longer, feeling lonely, and how the implications of that on someone's mental health. And then of course, there's possibly more respiratory or heart issues, and wearing that mask, may be too difficult for someone to wear, maybe completely over their nose or at all times. And it could be like maybe they just don't go out as much because of that, but also it could explain someone pulling off their mask for a moment or wearing it in a way that maybe doesn't cover their whole face. So those are all the sort of sensitive populations I've been thinking about during this, especially people that are still, very independent, able to go out on their own, able to live on their own, and then they still want to be able to do that, even though we're in a quarantine. And just how I could see how some of those things may be perceived by others as negligent or, not being careful, like not being careful enough, not being considerate of others, when maybe there's just an explanation based on not having, the ability to be as careful as you'd want someone to be. So that's really where those thoughts came from. So how can we encourage empathy in ourselves and with the people that we interact with? You can work on hearing someone's experience without interrupting or reacting immediately. And, this really goes for social media and what people choose to share on social media, like in terms of their experiences out in the community or reacting to other people's experiences from out in the community. Just kind of thinking, without reacting immediately or posting publicly immediately. And then next we have, if you're actually, in person or in a situation like this, you can pay attention to body language and nonverbal communication. You can try to understand people even if you don't agree. You can ask people questions to learn more about them and their lives or why they may be doing or not doing something. And you can imagine yourself in another person's shoes and take time to reflect before calling someone out. And avoid sort of like what I would call shame posting and just assume that people mean better. Because that was something I noticed a lot, especially at the beginning. I think people have cooled off a little now, but when everyone was really, really frightened at first, there was a lot of sort of public Facebook, not so discreet posting, especially in like the Galena locals page and things like that, where people were kind of calling people out saying, I was here and this staff member did this and I'll never go there again, and all sort of and it's based out of people being freaked out and being, worried. And that explains it enough. But if we can all take a little time to reflect before sharing that information or find a better way to share that concern, it can be a little less distressing on everyone else and on, whoever you're accusing of negligence or disrespect in whatever way. So if you're feeling fired up, which, we all do, we all get stressed out, of course. So some tips for stress relief. Exercise is a really good one, just to take a walk. These are all things that we are allowed to do, even if the gym's closed or downtown's closed or whatever. But we can take a walk, we can write things down privately first, maybe consider it before we share it. We can talk with a trusted individual, friends or family. Take deep breaths, practice breathing exercises, maybe some yoga or like Reiki tapping, something. You can laugh, you can watch something funny, take your mind off of it. You can practice mindfulness. We can listen to music and of course time with pets, something, just to relax and have fun. And finally, moving forward, now things are opening up. So state by state, day by day, things are changing. So we just have to be extra patient being in the tri-state area because especially in Illinois, things in Iowa are moving a little faster, and in Wisconsin, and people are a little bit more like, you know, ripping their masks off like in a blaze of glory. So that's fine. But you know, it's up to us to decide when we choose to go out or don't go out, or go to Iowa or not go to Iowa. And we just have to try to remain patient as these things continue to change, and allow others to have that same control. You know, we have to remind ourselves that we can't necessarily control people that are going to go out and party in Platteville or at the, you know, motorcycle bar or whatever. So just to release that feeling that we even can control them, and release the responsibility that you feel to need to tell anyone else what to do. And it can help to stay cool in those situations, even if you violently disagree with what someone else is doing. So that concludes my slides and my sort of overview. So maybe we can open it up to any comments or any discussion people would like to share.
Well, that was excellent. Great overview of what people are going through.
Very good.
I mean, I think this is a thoughtful approach to helping people understand that the frustration and difficulty that they have with people around them may very well be their own problem, and they're not thinking through the person they're looking at. They bring their experience and then, I don't know, assume that everybody has the same experience. So you let them have it if you disagree. And I think this is a very valuable presentation, especially in a time like this. I would hope that other groups would, I don't know how you're dealing with this, but would respond to any outreach that you're making to share this, because this is certainly important at this time with all the conflict that's going on in the country.
Alison, I wanted to congratulate you on your presentation. I thought it was very well balanced.
Hey, you guys really shouldn't be in the same room on two different devices.
Oh, can you go in the other room? All right, you know this is going to vacate here. I just wanted to mention that, you know, in terms of empathy, it's important to understand that everyone has their own point of view, and these points of views are shaped by many things, as you have said. But it's also important to understand that what people believe is fact is sometimes depending on what their information sources are. And these days there are many information sources. Some are biased in certain ways, some are biased in other ways, and this affects how people feel about things. And it's important that if people say something, you have to consider where they're getting their information from and understand that, and that their opinion has value when you consider that. And so, you know, it's hard to judge what is objective truth anymore, but you can certainly appreciate the fact that someone else may have a different point of view because they are getting their information from another source.
I think one of the other things too is the fact that we never felt we really got the information. You'd be given the beginning of something, but then they would never end it. So, you know, just like if you got the virus, then, all right, what is going to happen with this virus, or who is getting it? Or they would talk in terms of, well, it's people with pre-existing conditions, and they're the people that are dying from it. Well, of course, I look at that and say, well, if you have a pre-existing condition, you still don't want to get the virus and die from it, because you might have a few more years to live if you don't get the virus. But I noticed with younger people, some younger people had that opinion a little bit more. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that it's probably one of the first times in their lives where they've really had difficulty and had something they don't have control of. And those of us that are older, we've experienced a lot of things, and we know that there's a lot of things in life you have no control over, and you have to learn how to live with that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest problems between the ages in handling this situation.
Well, I've noticed, Dolores, the whole "you don't know what you've got till it's gone" thing through this process, where took for granted that Bonnie and I would hop on an airplane and fly to Phoenix or to San Francisco to see our grandkids. And now the best we have is Facebook. And we were even at the point of, and within a week of buying an RV so that we could drive and not have to have contact other than a gas station or whatever. And that would have been completely nuts. Thank God we got away from that, but it was such a, yeah, not to be able to see those kids, you know, they're growing up and we're watching them on a little screen when they call on FaceTime. But it's just that the whole level of having that stress behind kind of there all the time as a problem arises. I was just on the computer with a bank talking about something and had to calm myself down and say, wait a minute, this person didn't make these rules. She's just communicating what she asked to tell me. And we ended up having a very nice conversation, but for the moment, there I was responding in ways that I usually don't, just because of the circumstances we're facing with this virus. So again, I think this is really a helpful presentation that ought to be out there more.
And my favorite like comparison is, and I try to remind myself this a lot, but the specific example of like what I could compare it to would be like when you have like an erratic driver or someone like flies by you and your first thought is like, oh, like what an idiot, you know, or whatever. But instead I try to be like, well, maybe there's a pregnant woman in the car, or maybe, you know, that's like, there's a huge emergency, and, you know, try to kind of like think, kind of like assume the best. And it just releases me from feeling that annoyance of like, how could they, you know? So and now there's just so many more, it's so much easier to be mad at someone because there's so many things that we expect of people, like, how could they, you know, like lick their finger to turn a page, or, you know, something. It's like, just, you know, what horrible behavior, you know? And now it's like, so it's just trying to remember that we're all out here trying, you know, and there are that's not to say there aren't people that aren't just negligent and don't care or think that it's all bogus or something. There are those people, but the majority of people are trying their best, I would say.
I think one of the big things too is the fact that you feel like there's a wave coming and it hasn't hit yet, but you're not sure when it's going to hit, but it will hit. And it's that unknown that has people uneasy about all of this. And you're hoping I think as we live here and we have so few cases of it, and we really don't know people that have it. And so it does seem very removed, but yet in the back of your head, you always know, well, if I go over to Dubuque and go shopping, there'll be someone by me that will give that to me. So I shouldn't go over there shopping, or, you know, you hesitate about what you should do. And that's something we had total freedom of before. You could just run and go here, there, and not have to. That was one thing you certainly never had to worry about in your life.
Well, you know, I think it's also important to understand that different people have different tolerance for risk. I mean, I ride a motorcycle. That's risky. You know, statistically, I'm much more likely to be traumatically injured than someone that doesn't. I ride horses. You know, you put yourself 8 feet off the ground, you know, that horse gets spooked, it can throw you, it can hurt you. You know, so my tolerance for risk is at a certain level. I may have a greater tolerance than someone else. Someone else may say, I'm not going to take any risks. I would never do that. And they have the right to do that. You know, if they want to stay in their home, if they want to wear the mask, if they want to just, you know, totally avoid contact with everyone, then that's acceptable and understandable, and people should accept that. And on the other hand, if there are other people that want to take more risks, there should be tolerance for that as well.
For sure.
You know.
But it does tick me off when people tell me to what extremes they go when they get their groceries and when they get their mail. And it's just not my nature. It's like, okay, if it gets me, it gets me. I'm going to do everything I possibly can, but don't tell me, you know, it's sort of like the person that does everything perfect. Nobody does everything perfect. You know, so I don't want to listen to you.
I saw
know
a patient yesterday. I shook his hand, you know, sorry, you know, I'm sorry, Dr. Fauci. I'm not going to forget shaking hands, you know, but I went in the car, I put some Germex on him, you know, so,
yeah.
You know, wash your hands, don't touch your
Yeah,
face.
That's right.
You know, stay out of room where you're breathing someone else's air. You know, I mean, it's just common sense stuff by and large. There's always the outlier who can get it off a, you know, surface or something, but generally speaking, you know, I don't know. It's, as you say, it's still, there's so many unknowns, and the uncertainty of it all is unsettling on everybody.
Well, we just have so much going on in the world today, so many things that are irritating, that I think this is just one more. We weren't expecting this to happen. And so our life is full of uncertainties. And at this age of my life, I don't want that.
No, me neither.
Well, you know, you visualize what retirement is going to be like, and then this crazy chaos shows up instead. And it's really, I mean, I've lost about 35 pounds since this began. I started to try to lose some weight just before, well, right near the end of February. And then the time I've had, because I'm at home all the time, and either that or in the house or outside working, that I've been able to focus to get rid of weight that I've been thinking about and being frustrated with for about, what, 15 years now, is gone. And I had to go get a whole new wardrobe, mostly online, because I had none of my clothes fit.
I thought you went vegan.
You what?
I thought you went vegan.
Yeah, well, no.
That
No, I
too,
just,
you know.
I mean, I would say that probably a lot, in general, probably did. There's more vegetables than anything else. But so in some ways, this has been nice for Bonnie and me. The, you know, quiet time, and we like to read, and, you know, you're not as responsible to do things socially, you know, as expected in the normal course. And so in some ways it's been nice, but this separation from our family has just been very frustrating. And
But the other thing you have, John, is you don't have the temptation to go out to eat because you can't go to the restaurants. I mean, it's opening up a little bit, but you didn't have that temptation to say, no, there's nothing in the house to eat. Let's run down so and to get a sandwich or what have you. We can't.
well, that's right. We still do it.
Time, and that helps.
We do it curbside.
Yes.
But you know, not every day, or not spur of the moment that you would do normal times.
So Allie, you said this thing is streaming. This thing is streaming live on Facebook. So this should show up, and can we share this so this can be spread through social media a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. It's on the Galena Public Library Facebook page, and I'll be putting it on YouTube when we're done here. So it'll be in both places.
Well,
And
I
I
should
can,
have put on more makeup if I'd have known all of this.
oh,
Don't worry, you're not that
Me
well
too.
lit.
Alison, have you done these kinds of little seminars or whatever you want to call them along the way? Is this something new that you're working on?
What do you mean? Do you mean digitally, or do you mean with the subject matter?
Well, both digitally and in person prior to all this chaos.
I've done a couple programs with Larissa now. We mostly just on tech training.
Okay.
This was more of like a you know, just more of like a discussion I wanted to put out there. It was, at first I was just thinking it would be like a letter to the editor or something. But then, you know, I thought I was going to propose a program to Larissa about some tech training, some tips for people, and that's the one we did last week. And then I thought maybe this would be like a nice way for people in the community to be reminded, you know, just that kind of, but it's still from that angle of like people with visual impairment, people with different disabilities, age-related stuff. Just like to kind of like have that same mentality that I have. So a little bit is my answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was very well structured and well presented. And I urge you to get out there and see if people will take the time to listen, because I think it's great.
Thank you.
You were well trained back in music class.
Oh, yes. And now for my vocal performance.
Yeah.
She can do that too.
Yeah.
It's true. It's a pretty subjective audience here.
She likes
it's
the great
very good.
flaming Sakanagi as well.
Yeah.
That's right. Very dangerous outdoors. Very dangerous.
So
Setting
Allison, are
things
you
on
going
fire?
to do more of these? Are you going?
Yeah, probably as I come up with different ideas. I'm setting up some training at Prairie Ridge soon, some iPad training, like with the same program through Zoom. So working on that, and then yeah, hopefully we'll continue to work with the library and come up with different programs to the community, because it's fun and it's a nice way to, you know, connect with people. I did a couple in-person classes in February before everything shut down, and that was really nice. We had a pretty good turnout for that. So yeah, I'll keep you posted. You know where to find me though in the meantime.
Yes.
So,
That's very good.
Well,
all right. Well, I guess that's it. This is my, wait, hold on. I got one more. There's my little slide with my contact. I got a website. Otherwise, like I say, you know, not hard to find in this town. So thank you guys for coming, and
Thank you, Allison. Great
that's
job.
it, I guess.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
bye.
Thank you very much.